Aravalli Hills of Haryana are the last remaining virgin forests of the National Capital Region that make them prime real estate today. Citizens of Gurgaon and Faridabad have been fighting along with locals to protect these eco-sensitive hills from being eaten up by real estate interests. But it looks increasingly difficult and like a losing battle thanks to silent policy maneuvers by the government. Vasudha Sharma reports what's really going on there.
The Aravallis of Haryana are fighting for survival. Haryana's forest cover is the second lowest in India. And yet it continues to look the other way when its last patch of Aravalli forests are fast getting sliced up for real estate. Locals who call these Aravalli ranges of Gurgaon and Faridabad their home for generations reveal how their village common lands have become a booming market for farmhouses.
बिजनेसमैन जो लॉबी है वो यहाँ पे हावी हो गई है और वो हर तरीके से अपने तरीके से जो चाहे वो मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ यहाँ पे क्या है हमाम में सभी नंगे हैं वाली कहावत है यहाँ पे पॉलिटिशियन भी है यहाँ पे एनजीओ सेक्टर भी है यहाँ पे प्राइवेट लोग भी हैं गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर भी है ये जो बाबू लोग हैं
Few kilometers from Delhi, just off the Gurgaon-Faridabad expressway, the Mangarbani Grove, sacred to locals here, is on the radar of both Haryana's town planners and private companies with land holdings here. What you see behind me is an under-construction hotel which locals say belongs to a political family. At various places in this Mangarbani, you can see gated farmhouses and demarcated plots belonging to private companies waiting to go public when the laws turn in their favour. Change of land use, fencing of land and construction activities continue without a check, all taking advantage of the fact that the Aravallis are still not labelled as forests by Haryana.
16 से लेके सरिस्का राजस्थान तक एक ही ये बेल्ट है, एक ही वाइल्ड लाइफ कॉरिडोर भी है। उन्होंने तो कर दिया दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट ने और उसे 16 वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी तैयार कर दिया, लेकिन हरियाणा ने अपना पार्ट प्ले नहीं किया।
जो अब तक रेवेन्यू रिकॉर्ड पे चढ़ा हुआ फॉरेस्ट है उसे तो ये फॉरेस्ट की डेफिनेशन दे रहे हैं, मगर जो नहीं है और जो जंगल आगे डेवलप हो गया उसे ये कह रहे हैं कि वो फॉरेस्ट ही नहीं है। जो डेफिनेशन होती है तो फॉरेस्ट की डेफिनेशन है तो वो स्टार्ट होती है फॉरेस्ट इंक्लूड्स, तो वो एक इंक्लूसिव डेफिनेशन है तो उसको बढ़ाने का एक स्कोप है।
The nail in the coffin will come from what is transpiring at the centre. The Environment Ministry is rewriting the Forest Conservation Act to introduce a new definition of forests. The draft proposal says that only areas notified as forests and those with a dense tree canopy will be classified as forests. Environmentalists say this opens up the Aravalli ranges for commercial use because its natural dry canopy in Haryana's semi-arid climate will never meet the centre's new definition. The other policy manipulation that the Haryana government is playing in the background is in its sub-regional plan. Even as it designates the Aravalli ranges a natural conservation zone, it dilutes it with this oxymoron. Aravallis falling in the urbanizable areas are to be excluded. Environmentalists who have been studying Haryana's Aravalli forests say the clock has begun ticking, with most of the natural water channels having vanished.
We are ringing our death knell. Already 42% of Delhi's children are unable to breathe properly as they should be. Do we want to make that into 84% very soon? For whom are we buying these commercial buildings if not for our children? Do we want to starve them of air and oxygen in order to leave them a legacy of a building?
Economy cannot succeed without ecology. And in a chain reaction of events, sooner or later, losing the Aravallis will spell a weather and water crisis for Delhi NCR. With camera person AJ Joseph, Vasudha Sharma, NDTV.
Without the Aravallis, forest cover will just be 0.5% in Haryana. This is a shocking fact. With me today, Ritvik Datta, environment lawyer, and Colonel retired SSO Broy, RTI activist. Gentlemen, thank you very much. You know, you look at a story like this and it totally shakes you up. The last statement, Ritvik Datta, is so amazing and sums it all up. I mean, we are destroying the ecology for who?
I think if you look at it in very clear terms, what is today happening is a sorry state of affairs where in 1996 the Supreme Court made it very clear that the word forest must be understood in terms of its dictionary meaning. So, the very fact that whether it is notified or not notified, it is a forest. It is a tropical dry deciduous forest. It is scrub. It cannot be equal to a Western Ghats forest in terms of density, but anyone who visits the area will know that it is a forest.
Right.
And to use it for any other purpose than to conserve it is not only illegal, it is actually unconstitutional.
But Ritvik Datta, I understand the dense canopy part, that I think is very, very silly. But there is another argument that, you know, there is a certain part which has already been termed as a forest, and then there is a part which is over time grown and become a forest, isn't it? And that is the one which is under threat. So how do you get this new part also covered under the definition of forest? What will it take?
It doesn't really take, it won't take much of effort at all. If the government is keen, the people really want it, at least those who are going to be affected because of such a change in land use. It only needs the government to demarcate these areas. But even if you leave that out, as I said, the existing law in India does not really define forest. It says forest must be understood in terms of its dictionary meaning, and it covers all categories of land irrespective of ownership and classification. It is impossible in a country like India to demarcate every inch of land. So therefore, if it has all the characteristics of a forest as normally understood, keeping in mind the particular location of the forest. Now, as I am saying, you can't have a Himalayan forest in a Aravalli. So therefore, it has to keep the local situation into account, and therefore under that it is a forest. You have leopards there, you have nilgais there, you have so much of biodiversity and wildlife there. Every other day now you see a leopard dying in one of the farmhouse or the other snare. How does it exist? It obviously is eating. It is a vibrant ecosystem.
Fair enough. All right. So then let me come to this larger question on actually both the state government and the central government trying to rework the laws which will actually allow then for land use change in that area. Colonel Oberoi, what is your assessment of this fact that Environment Ministry is actually reworking the Forest Conservation Act, framing new guidelines, and we've got Ritvik who's saying, why do you need to, you know, demarcate it? It is a forest, everyone can see it, and that could have probably very, very terrible implications for Aravallis, isn't it?
See, the argument that is being used by the Ministry of Environment and Forest is that there is a public forest and there is a private forest. They are saying that public forest we can protect, but what can we do about the private forest? Now, my answer to that is that the private forest is also a forest. Now, if you see there is a 3 judges bench judgment in Samta versus State of Andhra Pradesh, which is overruling all these 2 judge bench judgments, and that gives something called the extended meaning of forest. And by that definition, even a desert could become a forest. What to talk of Aravallis? And the Aravallis have been...
So it's good. Actually, it's positive that beyond what has been publicly defined as forest, there's been natural vegetation growth thick enough for it to be called a forest. And why tamper with that, isn't it?
Now, if you read the Indian Forest Act, the Forest Act defines even the areas like Aravallis. So, that definition includes the Aravallis. It's the 1927 Act, and this Act came up from the 1880 Act. So, therefore, the definition of forest is unchanged for the last 200 years or 150 years. So, the government saying that private or public is trying to put a whitewash over something, because private or public has already been ruled long back by the Supreme Court in all its judgments and the 3 judge bench judgment of the Samta. So, therefore, this private and public argument will not wash.
So, what is happening there currently? I mean, I could see in the footage and the shots that there are already certain private companies which have started building hospitality or hotels there. They are waiting and bidding their time for the land use laws, or for them to be able to look at some regulation changes and then probably go in. Ritvik Datta, what are the dangers? I mean, how do you see this? If the government doesn't wake up, what could happen in this area?
See, already we see a lot of private entities, whether it's individuals, very, very prominent people in the society who are buying these lands. Now the Forest Conservation Act unfortunately does not stop you from buying it if the area is under private ownership. So, the land has been bought in anticipation that if they allow or treat this as a non-forest area, tomorrow you can go around and build and come out with all the constructions that can happen. So, therefore, this is basically a wait and watch approach. We already have the TSR Subramaniam committee, which is the high level committee for reviewing of environmental laws. It has recommended that the word forest must be understood only, that the word forest should be restricted only to government forest. And therefore, once the recommendation is adopted or accepted, immediately all areas outside reserve forest, protected forest will cease to be forest. And that goes contrary to the Supreme Court judgment itself. Okay. Because ultimately forest is what exists naturally as a forest, not because of the fact that under some law it is recognized as a forest. That's what we have to keep in mind.
No, so what are the dangers? I mean, here obviously there is a fight that you're fighting, Colonel Oberoi, and do you think that through campaigns like change.org, you will be able to present to the government, the Haryana government should itself be worrying about it, that they shouldn't turn Haryana into a complete concrete jungle? Are you beginning to see some effect of it?
See, there is no substitute for greed in our country. So this is a matter of greed. And you know, our Chief Minister might be well-meaning, our Prime Minister might be well-meaning, and they are. Okay. But the greed comes from the other levels in the government, and there are many sliding levels. So we don't want to name them, but we are aware of them and we are working on it. And really speaking, the strategy could not be revealed, but there is a strategy in place now. We are working on it.
All right. You're working on it. Last word, Ritvik Datta, in terms of what is Haryana staring at if the private area, let's even forget the public area, but they only have 0.5% of green cover currently. If the private areas of Aravallis, as we worry, are under threat and actually get converted into real estate, what happens? What should people be prepared for?
Firstly, it's known very clearly that it will be an ecologically suicidal act. And for the very simple reason that, you know, Aravallis is actually the groundwater recharge zone for the whole of the NCR region. Right. The quartzite rock formation actually recharges billions of liters of water. It provides you fresh, clean oxygen. Right. No apartment building can provide you either of these two. And therefore, what we are now doing is something which is already leading to a disaster. So what we have today is a remnant of what earlier existed. And this is a state of Haryana which has forest cover way below the national average that is required. Forget about 33%. On an average, if you take 12 to 10% forest cover for the whole of country, this is a state which has less than 2% of its area under forest. It cannot lose even a single hectare of forest land in future if it has to maintain its agricultural productivity and if it has to maintain a standard of living not only for the people of Haryana but in the entire NCR region. So saving the Aravallis, which is the oldest mountain range and which is this part is the last remnant good forest cover, is important not only for the state of Haryana but the whole country as a whole.
Absolutely. I think we are going to rest there. Ritvik has summed it up very well for us. So less than 2% of Haryana currently has green cover. If the Aravallis go, that number is going to dip to just 0.5% with concrete jungle all around. You can imagine what it will do to the future generations' lungs. I mean, what are we leaving behind for them? So for everybody to sit up and notice this and of course join campaigns which are fighting and groups which are fighting to keep the Aravallis alive. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this discussion.